One of the other countries that is being talked about in terms of joining AUKUS is New Zealand. It should be said that Canada, I think, and South Korea have also been mentioned, but there's been a lot of activity in New Zealand in terms of its foreign policy since. And like Australia, New Zealand's incredibly dependent on China for trade. It was the first developed country to sign a free trade deal with China about 15 years ago, and now about 30% or so, give or take, of New Zealand's exports go to China. And New Zealand is a country dependent on exporting, particularly agricultural, primary forestry goods. So as much as I think there's a key difference between the trade between New Zealand and China and Australia and China, which is that China really needs Australia in terms of its raw materials, its iron ore, that sort of thing. New Zealand needs China significantly more, I think, than China needs New Zealand. So any move to be part of AUKUS in any way would be would come with a pretty significant threat to New Zealand's economic well-being. And more broadly, I think any move to AUKUS would be probably the biggest shift in New Zealand's foreign policy in the past 4 decades or so, not just because it would anger China, but also because it would mean that New Zealand was aligning with the United States in a way that it hasn't for quite a long time, despite the fact that, the two countries have been very friendly, but also that sort of break in the 1980s was not quickly forgotten by the US or by New Zealand. And only in the last couple of decades have things started to warm up somewhat. So I think on the one hand, is New Zealand about to join? Well, that's a different question, but I think that's sort of the background there. Ronan, to bring you in on that, what do you make of that potential decision?
Absolutely. I think you covered a lot of the key points there. I think Australia definitely felt the pressure that breaking from China would be really difficult. We've had this ongoing trade war, which is now eased, which started in 2020 before the AUKUS decision was announced. And what was important for Australia was that China kept importing the iron ore and the coal and other essential products which they needed, and cut off just the agricultural goods, wine, barley, different things which were not. But Australia was able to prove that they could develop some sort of resilience against these trade sanctions, I think, by finding alternative markets for these goods. China is still a very important trading partner for Australia, but I think that kind of took away some of China's leverage. And I kind of see, like, if we look at New Zealand now, they've been able to observe how Australia dealt with the tariffs and the sanctions on Australian goods, such as these agricultural products, and said, okay, there is a possibility potentially to trade with other countries. Not that that's necessarily what they want to do, but that takes away some of the Chinese leverage potentially over the New Zealand position, just because there is a proven capability to potentially trade elsewhere. So I think if we look at New Zealand's position now, there has been a shift. Just even the talk about potentially joining AUKUS has been much louder over the last 6 months than would ever have been considered before. And I think they're kind of in the same boat as Japan. Like they would be potentially happy to be a significant partner of AUKUS, maybe not tightly integrated until there's this long-term development and, I guess, consistent strategic alignment of the New Zealand foreign policy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the change of government has been relatively significant. There has been, broadly speaking, a united foreign policy front in New Zealand for quite a long time now, where both of the main two parties, no matter who's been in government, they've broadly had the same views on things. That's definitely starting to change as this new government has shown. And I think that sort of just reflects the changes that are going on in the Indo-Pacific. And there's been growing calls within New Zealand that it can no longer, or at least to the same extent, remain kind of walking the tightrope